Thank you for joining us again here on another episode of Get Ready News. I am Mark Lindsted. This is my brother David Lindsted. And we like to go through the news articles that we see currently and try to find them biblically, how we should either view them or where we might even see that news taking place in the Bible.
It's always good to view things according to the Bible and using that kind of as a lens to let us know how things are going and what we should believe and shouldn't believe. It's a good discerner of truth, would be a good way to say that.
Definitely. And I think that it can also tell us certain things like how to vote in a sense. It may not give you the candidate's name, but it's going to give you morality-wise probably who's closer biblically than the other candidates.
And I think that's as good as we can get on this earth and this time and this government is to do what we think the Bible is leading us to do and where God leads us to vote and how we should live our lives here.
Yeah, I would say that we align with whatever candidate is morally closest to the Bible.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that's not a ruler that many people measure up to. But there are some that are closer than others.
Yeah, and it still baffles me to this day how people could vote for somebody who was for infant murder.
Yes.
You know, I just can't. And even the one that I'm going to vote for doesn't want to ban it completely.
Yes. Yeah. So you got to go with one that's kind of the closest you can get to what might be morally correct.
Yes.
So and it's a hard world that we live in right now, and it's a definitely a sin-cursed world, and we kind of do the best we can while we're here. There are a lot of articles to talk about today, mostly revolving around voting or mostly revolving around candidates, and that's why you see the background here, a vote.
Yes. There's a lot of things portrayed in the background that's going on, a lot of things that are being moved in place, and I kind of have the feeling that they're being moved in place by the powers that be.
Yeah.
Maybe people would call that the deep state or the globalists around the world are actually moving pieces around, I think.
Sure. And I don't think that globalism is anything new. I think it's been trying to be the prominent thing for many, many years. In fact, we could see how the globalist agenda can be traced all the way through both the Democrat and Republican parties and their presidents and candidates who all associated with that type of a mentality. And it just even becomes more of the forefront now because it's out in the open. It's been happening for a while.
I think it wasn't until just maybe 20 years ago that I really started to see that it didn't matter if you voted Republican or Democrat, you actually were voting for the same philosophies. Maybe the Republicans were crawling that way and the Democrats were running that way.
Yeah.
But anymore, I think they're both walking briskly, if not running together hand in hand.
Well, I think that one party hides some of their progressivism in the footnotes of bills rather than the headlines of bills. And and maybe I'm naive, but my real wake-up call was in 2016 when I realized that, you know what, whether it's an R or a D in front of their name, most of them are corrupt.
Yeah.
Most of them are horribly, what do you want to call, the proper term would be they're taken in either blackmail or money or some type of compromise. That's what I was trying to say. They're compromised. And whether it be for power or money or blackmail, they're being compromised.
Yeah, it was obvious to me, and it just kind of flabbergasted me to see a Republican not back a Republican stance given by a Republican president and vote either not for it at all, abstain so that you're not even causing an issue, to voting against it.
Yeah.
You know, and it just said, well, this is supposed to be the party line, and they're not towing this line at all.
Well, I can tell you right now, I'm a fan of changing legislation to where one item may be brought, not a 10,000-page bill that is 9,995 pages of fat with 5 pages of we want to reform prison or we want to reform the border, and then we're going to spend $100 billion on this other stuff that we want.
Yeah, kind of like the inflation increasing bill. What was that called? An inflation reduction bill or something like that. And it turned out it was none of that. It was actually increased our inflation because it was a climate control bill that increased our energy and cost and all sorts of other stuff.
I saw a really interesting graph the other day. It was a graph on Venezuela, and it talked about the moment the government imposed government control of pricing, which is what Kamala-nomics is.
Yep.
And what happened is, as soon as they did that, it wasn't that inflation was rising at 2, 3, 4%. It all of a sudden went boom off the charts, and that's when they collapsed. So the idea that the government is going to fix our prices is what toppled Venezuela.
Yeah, and I've seen an article where Kamala's wanting to fix prices in the supermarket, and you know, for these kids that are out there yelling and screaming fascism, that is the definition of fascism, is the government in cahoots with business and running all business. So all business is done through the government instead of through people.
It's nothing new for some of us who are older who understand what fascism and communism really looks like. But this gives segue right into where we're going to be today. And one of the things is I'm kind of tired of candidates who can't seem to make up their mind where they stand.
Yeah, there is so much flip-flop, and what really just set me back, and I don't have a slide on this, was, you know, Biden pronounced her to be the border czar.
Yes.
And every single news agency, except for, we'll say a handful, said she was never called the border czar. Yeah. Oh, no, it was never that way. She wasn't supposed to be that. And, you know, it's getting harder and harder, but you can still find where she said she was the border czar, and now she's not, you know, but they're scrubbing the internet.
There's actually government documents, look it up, I think it's HS 253, where it says that the Congress wants to remove Kamala Harris as the border czar because she's not doing her job. So, I'm sorry, it's written in government documents and forms. You can't deny it happened. But, and here we are with all these other shifting positions, though.
Yeah, and they're just, the thing that really bothers me the most is I don't know how many videos and things I've seen where people went and interviewed people on the street and asked them questions, and they have no idea.
No.
They think that whatever they've been told is absolutely true, and all it has to do is she has to come out and say it. The Operation Mockingbird clicks into gear, and all these news agencies say the same words over and over to the audiences.
Well, I know there's a big push right now to ask why in the world she hasn't done an actual major interview so people know where she stands, and I can tell you exactly why. First of all, they don't need her to make a gaffe where she makes a statement that they have to try then to make sound right. Because when Kamala speaks in these word salads that she speaks in, she really does a disservice to everybody. And I can't help but think of, I remember what Sandler movie it was where he says, we're all stupider for listening to what you just said.
Yeah, I think it was Billy Madison.
Yes.
But, you know, the thing that I see with Biden and Harris is I see the two most illegitimate people, people that could not have done this job, period. And they were here for one reason only, to be the mouthpiece for the people that do want to run this.
Yeah.
And with Biden leaving, it leaves Kamala, and she is almost as bad as Biden, and Biden has an excuse.
Yeah, she doesn't have any idea what's going on.
No.
And you talk about marijuana here, and I remember seeing this interview she did where, you know, she's put, I think they said more than 1,500 people away for marijuana in California, and even really found ways to enforce the law further and keep them in longer than they should have been. And then when they asked her about it in the podcast, she says, well, I inhaled. And starts laughing that horrible laugh.
Oh, yeah, it's just two-faced. It doesn't surprise me anymore. The older I get, the less surprised I am. But this is a slap in the face to everybody that she was over in California. You know, she's supposed to be doing a job, and she's supposed to be enforcing the law of the land. And maybe the law of the land was to do this to the marijuana people, but that was her job.
Yeah.
And for her to come back and say, well, I did that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's making a mockery of the law and of these people.
You bet. You bet. And it's been, but it's been a position of a lot of politicians to flip flop, to be a chameleon. It's just like she did the Southern accent, just like Hillary Clinton did when they went to Georgia and she started talking about, I ain't no way tired, And it's like, just be yourself. We want to know who you are so we can vote appropriately. And I think that they don't want you to know who they are because they don't want you to vote appropriately.
Yeah, I also think that if a candidate came out there and said, I used to be against fracking because I really want to take care of the environment. I think it's causing earthquakes and stuff like that, but I've changed my mind.
Yes.
And now I am for fracking because of this, and this. I don't have a problem with that. Yeah. But what I have a problem with is your line has always been no fracking, and all of a sudden, today you told me you're for it.
It's one thing to change your mind because of evidence.
Yes.
It's another thing to be a chameleon and hide your mind.
Just to change it because your goal is to get a vote.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what else have we got going on here? Oh,
this one's funny. I couldn't believe it when I heard her say this. It just bowled me out of my chair.
Now, didn't she and Biden sign a bill going after tax money?
They did. Tips? They of course wanted to put more IRS people on the ground, and they signed a thing saying that they were going to make sure that all tips were taxed and appropriately.
Interestingly enough, Hunter Biden is not behind bars for all the tax evasion he's done. But they did hire so many more IRS agents to come after your $600 that you didn't tell them about that you made when you were 15 from your dad.
Yep, and I've seen memes and stuff where they're coming after that 5 cents you swallowed when you were a kid. But it's pretty bad. But then all of a sudden, Trump goes out and says, my next thing is I'm not going to charge tax on tips, and they're like, oh no, the world is coming to an end.
We're going to lose, I think I saw one report, it was $250 billion in tax revenue over 10 years. I'm going to tell you right now, that's what, $2.5 billion a year? That's nothing in the American economy.
Nope.
We throw that in the toilet every day. We don't care about it.
That's about interest, isn't it?
That's not even interest. That might be interest for an hour. But now they're talking about this is going to sink the ship. This is going to kill us. And then Kamala comes out and says, I really want to put people at ease. I want to let them to know they're going to have more money in their pockets.
Yep.
So I'm going to I'm going to talk about a tax relief. We're not going to charge taxes on tips anymore.
Yeah.
And what comes out, the articles come out.
Oh, wonderful.
She's for the people. She wants us to have more money and a better life.
This could be the leader that we've been looking for. This is the one. She went from, now remember that when she was running against Biden in 2020 to become the president nominee, she got 0 votes.
0.
She was the bottom most candidate.
Yeah.
And then Biden picked her. And now that Biden is no longer there, she all of a sudden is the most popular candidate ever.
And never received a Democrat vote to be in a position. Biden got all the votes for president.
She got all the delegates. That's what they'll say, but she was never voted for. She didn't win this, She was just appointed by the powers that be, and I think they have a harder time with her than Biden.
Yeah.
Because she can't get sentences out, and she can't make sense of anything. It's just pretty terrible.
Who doesn't like a school bus?
That's right.
Oh, yellow school buses are the best. The school buses are best. Everyone rides a school bus. Everyone, school buses, and that's really what it sounds like when I listen to her. That's all I hear.
Yeah, every time she talks, it sounds like she's trying to talk to kindergartners. And I don't know if that's because that's her level, or she thinks she has to talk down to people, or what.
Well, somebody asked her about inflation the other day, and she says, well, it is harder on people's wallets. The prices are going up, and that's called inflation. And it's like, answer the question, quit restating things we know.
I think that the greatest thing I saw out there, and I agree with this 110%, it says, if you vote me in the office, I'll take care of inflation.
Yes.
And then someone says, You're already in office. Why
Yeah.
can't you take care of inflation now?
You've been there for 3.5 years. What have you done?
If they
Borders are?
just think, if she would have taken care of inflation, she wouldn't be in this boat.
Yeah,
She
there
would
wouldn't
have
be,
already tied this election up.
there wouldn't be a poll showing they're neck and neck. I don't think they're neck and neck. I don't care what polls say.
No, I tell you what, the other thing that just amazes me is how many people I see that have crossed the lines to the other side, and I don't mean just Democratic side, but this liberal side. That'd be like the Drudge Report.
Yeah.
And like some of these pollsters that used to be pretty in the middle, I thought, and all of a sudden I'm seeing them as part of CNN's team or Microsoft's team.
And I'm wondering how many of those were really already there. We just didn't know it. And they
Yep.
were doing opposition research and things of that nature, just basically baffling everybody.
Yep. But this brings us into another point of contention that we've kind of talked about in the past, and we're looking at the election that's coming up, and we're looking at the election that was behind us.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things that I found interesting about the previous election in 2020 was the amount of people and the amount of votes that were cast. So, Barack Obama had, until then, the highest amount of votes ever won by a president. And then Trump comes along and he wins enough to get the Electoral College and beat out Hillary. The next time he is voted on, he beats Barack by millions.
I think he got 10 or 12 million more votes than Barack.
The most
Than
any
Hillary?
president has ever gotten, ever. And then somebody who slept in their basement and did just a very few little shows with nobody there shows up and beats him by 6 million votes.
It's crazy. I don't know how you could say it was a fair election.
Yep.
And I don't know. I don't want the UK police to come get me if I say something wrong here. But anyway, I don't know. I don't see how you can call that as it says, the most secure election that's ever been run in the United States.
That's a pretty big statement. I mean, that is a huge statement to say this is the most secure election in history.
And we're supposed to believe that out of all voting, we surpassed the amount of people who normally are added to the voting ranks each year by 100-fold.
Yeah,
I mean, just out of the blue, 10 million more people decided to vote that year than before.
it's even actually bigger than that. It is unbelievable the jump in amount of people that voted that year. It is unbelievably huge, and a lot of that has been contributed to mail-in ballots because remember, we had a pandemic, a plandemic, however you want to say that, and it bypassed all sorts of rules that we normally wouldn't have allowed.
Well, you would think that something that forces people to stay home would hinder the vote a little. In fact, I expected there to be less votes cast because people didn't understand mail-in balloting or for some reason, or they just didn't care. They're like, no, I'm not going to deal with it. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to do it. I would have expected a decline in votes, not a steep increase beyond measure.
Huge increase. In fact, most people remember the graph where it went straight up overnight, and they claim that's because of mail-in votes.
Yeah.
And they had to wait until a certain time to count them, and that's when they were put in the system, is when they stopped counting, and they went and put all these votes in there, then they resumed the next day.
Isn't that when the videos started coming out of people taking the ballot from the counted pile and putting it back in the machine?
Yep, and vans showing up in the middle of the night unloading stuff. But, you know, is this one article on here says, even mail-in ballots are so secure, and I don't know how. But my next article is very interesting. It says, new poll finds admitted evidence of voter fraud in the 2020 mail-in election with the balloting. So you say, well, what do you mean by that, Dave? Well, there are certain rules, even during the pandemic, that you cannot break with a mail-in ballot.
Yeah.
The problem is you have no idea if those rules were broke when that ballot was sent to you.
Well, I think one of the most telling things that I heard you say was it 10% of all poll workers say they know somebody who voted in a state they no longer live in?
Yep. That is a true statement from this article, and they also said that there was around 17% that filled this out for a family member that was no longer in the house. Other ones signed for people who were no longer in the house and sent it in. There is a lot of things that were troublesome.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is I don't know that we ever got confirmation that people checked signatures to make sure signatures matched.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and there's been proven over and over and over and over again, there are cases of people actually going to jail and paying fines for voter fraud. So don't let them lie to you. There was plenty of voter fraud in 2020. They just don't want you to understand that it might have been enough to change the election.
Exactly. And the mail-in balloting had increased over 43% this year.
Wow.
So there was so much more opportunity to cheat with these.
I found these ballots in my trunk. I forgot about them.
We saw that actually happen. So it was a happening thing. I think it was Arizona where they found a box of ballots, you know, and something like that.
But let me tell you, be careful, because guess what's getting ready to happen right now? The next article here shows you what? Oh no, we have a new pandemic. Look at this. The WHO declares a global emergency for Mpox because they have their first reported case outside of Africa in Sweden.
You know, this sounds terrifying. The monkeypox, I don't want to get monkeypox. It sounds horrible, but you know, there's certain things you have to do to get this disease. It's not coming by mosquito.
No.
It's not coming by eating something wrong.
Nope.
It's not coming by, well, I guess it could come by injection, but you're not going to contract it at the hospital.
Nope.
There's a certain way that you get this monkeypox.
There certainly is, and the Bible speaks against it, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I believe it does too. And interestingly enough, there was an article, you know, about 2 dogs that contracted this monkeypox.
Really?
Yep, I will bring that up.
Yeah. Well, my point with this article is say, look, we're how far out from the election? It's August right now. We got September, October, November. We are 60 days or so away from this. I mean, we're not far from being to vote. And where are we? The pandemic is spreading.
Yes.
You know, sooner or later, I guarantee, I don't care if they have to fly the person here from another country, they're going to have a guaranteed case in the United States. I guarantee it. They're going to say it's here. Everyone stay home, vote from home. We'll tally the votes at 3 a.m. and let you know who won.
You know, my next question is did Biden sign the treaty with WHO?
Yes, he did.
And can WHO come in and stop us under the guise of an emergency that we can't vote? Or that everybody has to vote for home or from home or something like that.
Well, and many countries, many first world Western style cultures signed a treaty saying the WHO can declare an emergency and tell us what to do. And the WHO is not of elected people, just so you know.
No.
And they've been wrong more than they've been right.
You know, WHO was one of the ones that were promoting masks.
Yes.
And they knew that they didn't work.
Yeah. Well, we wanted you to psychologically feel better about it. Ridiculous. Well, what we can see, though, is that through all this election problems and through this idea that there's another global emergency, is that truth has really fallen in our world. Truth is on the ground getting trampled on day by day.
And, you know, it depends on where you go for truth. And that's one of the things that we like to do is bring the Bible into this. And I really think that there's only one real good source for truth, and that's the Bible. In fact, the Bible says in 2 Timothy 3:7, that these people will be ever learning and never come to the knowledge of truth. Yeah. And we see all of these women, these other people in schools never really learning anything, going over and over and over again, building up I don't know what,
Yeah, well, being able to regurgitate.
And they have no truth. They don't know what truth is.
Well, and really, colleges used to be about teaching someone how to critically think.
Yes.
And nowadays, it's can you repeat and parrot what I told you so that you understand that I'm right, you're wrong, and we're going to push this narrative all the way through. It's the same thing from the beginning of time. It's always going after the children. Look at how many times did the Hitler youth, it was about brainwashing the youth into believing exactly what Hitler wanted them to believe. Look at Mao Zedong and the Red Guard and the putting off of the old. We don't want the old religion, we don't want the old truths, we don't want the old culture, we don't want the old anything, because we want to bring our own new thing.
And that's a big push. I was listening to some kids talk, and they were talking about how dumb their parents were.
Yeah.
How their parents have no clue. Now, I'm not saying every parent is an Einstein, but someone who's lived 30, 40, 50 years on this earth has a lot more experience and knowledge than someone who's lived 15 years.
Yeah, and most of that as a toddler.
Exactly. And you're just going and you're listening to people say stuff and you're not checking this. I feel like, at least in the era that I grew up, we went to books.
Yeah.
And we went to magazines, and you couldn't just lie on something. Now you go to Wikipedia. I guarantee you're not going to find truth every time you hit Wikipedia.
Well, and we become, I guess what I would say, a less knowledgeable nation.
Yes.
Because information's at our fingertips, so why would I ever keep information in my head anymore?
Yep.
And we could see that all the time. But we also saw biblically where even Pontius Pilate says, what is truth?
Yes.
And really what he probably should have said is, who is truth?
Exactly.
Because in John 1 we read that truth and grace entered into the world by Jesus Christ. Jesus is the truth. And when you read the verse that says, you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free, that's not talking about just the freeing nature of confessing a sin or confessing a lie of some kind. He's talking about you'll know Jesus Christ. You'll know that he's the Savior. And that truth of Jesus Christ will set you free. You're no longer a slave to sin, but you're a slave to righteousness. Yeah. You're a bondservant to righteousness, not a slave to sin.
And that's been used wrong so many times, and I still think that the wrong is correct.
Yeah.
Truth will set you free to an extent, but this is the truth.
The truth
of God.
I am the truth. I am the way, and I am the life. Only one way to God, and that's through Jesus Christ, the truth. So thanks for joining us this week. As we come up further on this election, we'll see more of these things, and we'll try to spread it out a little bit less than political next time. But we really appreciate you joining us. We'll see you next week.